So we were on the verse number 17. Inaction never leads to liberation. All understanding ends up in Atma. Another description of a wise person. Inaction, inaction. कर्मणो ह्यपि बोद्धव्यं बोद्धव्यं च विकर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बोद्धव्यं गहना कर्मणो गतिः. That is, action enjoined by the scriptures is also to be known. Forbidden action and actionlessness must also be known. This is because the nature of karma is difficult to understand. So this we saw yesterday. And then karmanyah karmayah paschet akarmani cha karmayah sabuddhiman manusheshu sayuktah kritsna karma krita. So one who sees actionlessness in action and action in actionlessness is wise among human beings. That person is a yogi who has done everything that is to be done. So another description, inaction, inaction. I think this is where we needed to continue with. Fine, we'll read this whole verse one more time. So Shankara writes an extensive commentary bhashya on this verse, setting out the various arguments that are relevant to this important topic. In order to gain a clear understanding of karma and akarma, we look into this particular bhashya in some detail. It was said that even the informed are deluded with reference to the nature of action and inaction. Karma here means action in general and is not restricted to scripturally enjoined rituals, as it is elsewhere in the Gita. Because even the learned are confused, Krishna says he would reveal to Arjuna the nature of karma, which implies akarma also, knowing which he would be liberated from doubt, from samsara. What is to be done and what is not to be done are both considered to be karma, action. Killing, for example, and helping someone are two different actions. Killing is a prohibited action, nishiddha karma, and helping another person is an enjoined action, vihita karma. So the terms nishiddha is prohibited, vihita. Vihita means that is enjoined, that is what is given in the scriptures. A command, vidhi, is always with reference to an action, either to do it or not to do it. Because one may hurt another, the Shruti enjoins us not to hurt anyone. Ahimsa paramo dharma. So not to hurt anyone. May one not drink alcohol and may one not eat meat are also scriptural injunctions or don'ts with reference to the actions one performs. Similarly, there are a number of commands concerning the do's, the actions that are to be done. Thus, there is a list of do's and don'ts for people to follow, all of which are karma. Akarma is also to be understood in terms of karma. Is akarma simply not doing action, or is it something more? The very nature of action, its svarupa, is what we are trying to understand here. Only when action is properly understood can one understand what non action or the absence of action is. People generally understand the absence of action as not doing action. If you do not do something, this non performance is the absence of action. When a man who is walking stops walking, the action of walking has stopped. There is a standstill, no action. But standing still is also an action. Try standing still and you will understand how difficult an action it is. Similarly, sitting still is an action, which is why you cannot do it for very long. By sitting still is to be deluded. There is no such inaction in fact. To think that not performing action is inaction is no different than thinking that printing more currency will resolve a country's tight money situation. Such a simplistic approach cannot solve the problem and will create additional problems because it is not that easy. Similarly, to understand inaction is not as easy as it seems. What Krishna says in this verse is in keeping with what he had said earlier in the second, third, and fourth chapters. Although the present verse is very cryptic, it can be understood by keeping in mind what has gone before. Another description of a wise person. Here, Krishna describes a person who could see inaction in action and action in inaction. What kind of a person is this? If he or she sees a man walking, does the person see him as standing still? And if he is standing still, does the person see him as walking? This is like watching someone eating and having the person tell you he or she is not eating at all. Usually, we would think that such a person was mentally deranged in some way. But here, Krishna says that one who sees action in inaction and inaction in action is a wise person, buddhiman. Then, to top off the confusion, Krishna goes on to say that such a person is a Kritsna Karma Krit, someone who has done everything that is to be done. This means that there is nothing more for this person to do. He or she is free, whereas for others, there remains a long list of to be dones and not to be dones. This list, as long as it exists, is unending because the items to be done and not to be done are difficult to fulfill. What you ought to do is not always possible to do. Nor can you always avoid doing or saying what is not to be done or said. Also, the to be dones and not to be dones go on increasing. With reference to the food one eats or personal ambitions, for example, there are a number of things to be done and not to be done. Like this, everyone has a long list, and even if some of the items are fulfilled, so many others pop up in their place. Some items on the list are very clear to you, while others may be vague. Still, they are there below the surface and will become clearer in time, like a Polaroid film. This then is the situation for everyone. Here, Krishna describes the person who has managed to fulfill all the items on the list as being one able to see action in inaction and inaction in action. So, this is more a matter of understanding. It is not something to complete the whole list because the list is never ending. He praises such a person and refers to him or her as being wise, buddhiman. If seeing is all that one has to do to be wise, the seeing itself must be very difficult. The words themselves reveal the difficulty. How can I see action in inaction and inaction in action? Inaction in action. The usual locative case meaning for the word in the expressions inaction, inaction, and action in inaction does not apply here. When we say, where is he sitting? The response on the ground denotes a location where the action of sitting is taking place. Similarly is the case with the statement, the book is in my hand. However, here Shankara dismisses any sense of location with reference to action and inaction, saying that action cannot become the location or the basis for inaction. Inaction being the absence of action, it is not there to be located upon action. Inaction does not exist. We cannot say that a non existent inaction sits upon action, just as we cannot talk about the horns that sit on our heads. Horns do not exist for us, and what does not exist cannot be said to be sitting anywhere. Similarly, we cannot say that the son of a woman who never gave birth to a child, Vandhya Putra, is sitting on the ground because there is no such person. In the same way, inaction, being the absence of action, does not exist for it to have any location. Therefore, action cannot be the basis for inaction, nor can that which does not exist in action be the basis for action. Therefore, the use of the locative case here is not to be taken in its usual sense. Rather, it means with reference to. So, this is something that we'll have to understand. So, it is not in the usual sense of how we understand action in inaction. It's not like it's located in action, but it is with reference to action. With reference to action, this person is able to see inaction, and with reference to inaction, he or she can see action. So it is not to be taken in the usual absolute sense. How can there be? Because inaction is something that is not there. So where something is not there, how can you attribute action to that? How can that the person like Krishna is explaining here, the one who sees action in inaction? So that has no meaning if you take the literal sense. Similarly, how can there be inaction in action? Inaction, when we say it is non existent, like the rabbit horns, or the horns of a rabbit, or the son of a barren woman, it is not there. So, how can the one who sees inaction in action? So, it makes no sense if you take it literally. So, how this verse has to be understood is with reference to action, seeing inaction, and with reference to inaction, seeing action. So, in the absence of action, karma abhava, the wise see action, and in the so called action, they see no action at all. When you perform an action, there is the notion I perform an action. Aham karomi. What is involved in this I perform an action? What is this action that you are doing? When you say I am talking or I am walking, the talking and the walking are actions centered on what? This then is the question. So, what is it centered upon when you say I am perform an action? When you say I walk, your legs and feet are involved in the action of walking. The mind is also involved, there having been a decision, a sankalpa, to perform the action of walking. Without a sankalpa, you do not perform a deliberate action. There is always a thought, a desire involved. So, in the action of walking, the mind is involved, the legs and feet are involved, and even the eyes are involved. And when you say, I perform an action, aham karomi, I aham is also involved. So, to what do you attribute the action? Do you attribute it only to the mind, to the body, to the legs, feet, to what? And I is also involved. So, in this process, the mind, senses, and the physical body are all involved. The physical body is called karya in Sanskrit, meaning product, and the mind and senses are called karana, meaning instruments. This assemblage of karya and karana is involved in the action that belongs to me. That is why I say, I perform this action. The I is also implied in action. I meaning Atma. Let's give this a thought. I'll just be back. So, in the process, the mind, senses, and the physical body are all involved. The physical body is called karya in Sanskrit, meaning product, and the mind and senses are called karana, meaning instrument. This assemblage of karya and karana is involved in the action that belongs to me. That is why I say, I perform this action. The I is also employed in action. I meaning Atma. So without the I, can you just say action is done? It needs to be centered upon something, right? So the results of action belong to the doer. And why do I perform this action? I perform an action for a certain result. And when the result comes, to whom does it go? Whom does it affect? It comes to me, the one who is the karta, the doer. Therefore, as the doer, I am the enjoyer. I perform this action for the sake of getting the desired result. Karma phala bhogaya aham idam karomi. In this way, we see that action involves the karya karana sanghata, the physical body, mind, sense complex, and also aham, I, the Atma. When I say I am the doer, I am the enjoyer, etc., on whom is the doership and enjoyership centered? It is centered on myself. The question that arises then is the I, the Atma, a doer or a non-doer, a karta or an akarta? If Atma is a karta, then I definitely perform action karma, which produces a result for me. This is real karma, binding karma. No action is possible without there being an agent, doer of the action, a karta. For example, when we say Rama goes, Ramaha gacchati, the going is done by Rama, the agent of the action of going. And although action is dependent on its agent, the agent is not dependent on action. This means that the agent, the doer, has a choice in terms of action. He or she can perform an action, need not perform the action, or can perform the action differently. This independent doer, the karta, who enjoys such freedom in terms of action, is what is reflected by the first or nominative case in Sanskrit, prathama karaka. There are a number of factors other than agency that are also connected to action. Whatever is connected to an action, because of which the action is made possible, is called karaka. So, whatever is connected to an action, because of which the action is made possible, is called karaka. There are 6 kinds of karakas. The agent of the action being the first, or prathama karaka, as we saw above. Then there is the object of an action. When Rama goes, Rama gacchati. Where does he go? He goes to the forest. Vanam gacchati. Forest being the object of the action of Rama's going. Thus, we have a doer and an object of doing, karta and karma, referred to grammatically as the nominative and the accusative, first and second cases. Then, how does Rama go to the forest? Does he go on foot or does he go in a chariot? What is the means of his going? The means by which he goes on foot is the third karaka or instrumental case. And why does he go? What is the purpose of his going? Rama went to the forest to fulfill the words of his father. Pitra Vakya Paripalanaya, giving us the fourth karaka or dative case. From where does he go? From which place? From the city of Ayodhya. Ayodhya Nagarat. He went to the forest. This gives us the fifth karaka or ablative case. Since it is also connected to the verb, the action of going. The final karaka is the locative case, as in Rama lived in the forest. Ramaha vane avasat. Here, forest is in the seventh case, expressing location. So, doing karma requires a doer. And we saw how there are 7 different ways, 7 karakas that describe this action. Not doing karma also requires a doer. Returning now to the first karaka, the karta, Shankara says that whether you say, I did this action or I did not do this action, the I, the ahankara is involved. Both the doing, pravritti, and the not doing, nivritti, are centered on ahankara, the karta. Therefore, if I am the karta, I am the karta in both action as well as inaction. But if I am not the karta, then there is no action at all for me because all action depends upon the karta. If I am someone who is not an actor, then I perform no action. Na kinchit karma karomi. The I is always free from action. It does not do any action. Atma neither does an action nor impels or prompts anything to act. Na karoti, na karayati. I will repeat this again. So, if I am not the karta, then there is no action at all for me because all action depends upon the karta. If I'm someone who is not an actor, then I perform no action. Na kinchit karma karomi. The I is always free from action. It does not do any action. Atma neither does an action nor impels or prompts anything to act. Na karoti, na karayati. So, first of all, to understand this action in inaction and inaction in action, it is not the general grammatical locative case that we take it as. Because inaction is non-existent. Because very clearly in the beginning itself, it is described that sitting is not inaction. Sleeping is not inaction. Not doing anything, there is still some action. So inaction is non-existent. You can never ever say that there is no action happening. Because there is some action or something that is going on that you can pick up as an action, right? You're simply sleeping. There is so much of action happening. You're breathing, the heart is beating. So there is action happening. So therefore, inaction, just like the barren woman's son or the horns of a rabbit, is non-existent. So how can you attribute something that is non-existent, or the person who's wise? How can implying something that is non-existent in action and vice versa? Action in inaction. How can that person, how do we understand the verse? So the the twist there is with reference to. Inaction cannot be the basis for action and vice versa. So that is the first understanding. The second understanding is it with reference to. So with reference to action, what are all required? You require the karya and the karana, the doer and the instruments that he requires. And then there are 7 different cases, karakas, which are very beautifully described in Sanskrit. I don't think any other grammar has has them described as beautifully as in Sanskrit. So Ramaha Gachati, where does he go? That becomes the accusative case. Vanam Gachati. And then it goes on like that. Why does he go? From where is he going? All of that. The where, why, how, what, when. So doing karma requires a doer, and not doing karma also requires a doer. Mistaking action for inaction and inaction for action. If Atma is neither of these, neither a simple karta nor a karayita. Karayita is that which impels action, one who causes action to be done. How can there be any karma? And if there is no karma, why does Krishna simply not say so? Why does he talk about seeing inaction in action? Karmani akarmayaf pashyet. The problem here, Shankara says, is that we superimpose kartritva on the Atma, which is really akarta, and say, I do this action or that action, when really the action belongs to the Karya Karana Sanghata. To illustrate this problem, Shankara gives an example that everyone can relate to. So, what is the mistake here? So, if Atma is neither of this, see, Atma neither does an action nor impels or prompts anything to act. Na karoti, na karayati. So if that is the case, then how can there be any karma? Why is Krishna talking about karma then? Why does he talk about seeing inaction in action? Karmani akarmaya paschet. The problem here, Shankara says, is that we superimpose kartritva on the Atma. So that mistaken identity, the fundamental problem, which is really akarta, and say, I do this action or that action, when really the action belongs to the Karya Karana Sanghata. To illustrate this problem, Shankara gives an example that everyone can relate to. When you are in a boat moving in a river, you see the trees on the river's bank moving in the opposite direction. Even though you are moving in one direction, the trees seem to be moving in the other, and you seem to be constant. This is in all our experience, correct? What does this mean? The trees are not really moving at all. They are not performing any action. But in these trees that are really standing still, you see an action. Akarmani karma darshanam. This kind of seeing is called viparita darshana, erroneous sight. Secondly, as long as there is this notion, I am the karta, merely not doing any action does not make one an akarta. Therefore, whenever one says, I am sitting quietly, I am not doing any action, aham tushnin asam na kinchit karomi, this person considers himself to be a karta. Therefore, he is doing the action of not doing any action. To illustrate this, Shankara gives the following example. Suppose you are standing on the river bank and looking at the boat, which is moving away from you. Having reached a certain distance, the boat seems not to be moving at all. To you, it appears stationary. Thus, an object can also appear to be constant when it is actually moving very fast. An example of this, not available to Shankara in his time, is a movie on a screen. Although it is a movie, a succession of rapidly moving frames, things like trees, mountains, and so on appear to us to be stationary. Here then, you see inaction in action. Karmani akarma darshanam. Thus, in the world, we see karma in akarma and akarma in karma. Similarly, with reference to karma and akarma themselves, there is viparita darshana, seeing what is not there. Darshana means sight, seeing, and viparita means other than what is. The self does not perform any action and therefore there is no action. The action you see is really inaction. In other words, there is no action in action because Atma is akarta. Knowing this, the wise person performs action, but at the same time knows he does not perform it at all. Doing, the person does not do. Kurvan na karoti. Seeing, the person does not see. Pashyan na pashyati. Hearing, the person does not hear. Shravan shrunoti. Shrinvan shrunoti. Similarly, smelling, one does not smell. Tasting, one does not taste. This should be actually Shrinvan na Shrunoti. So, walking, one does not walk. Talking, one does not talk. Thinking, one does not think. Even being confused, the person is not confused. A wise person can be confused in that his or her mind can become confused with reference to a particular thing. For example, there may be confusion about the direction to be taken in order to reach a certain place. Thus, being confused, the person is not confused. Does not mean that the wise do not get confused. What does all this mean? For the wise, the I, the Atma, in the statement, I am confused, remains untouched by any action because it does not perform any action. If a man is acting, we say he is acting. And if he is not, we say he is keeping quiet. But is there really a time when he is not doing action? Keeping quiet simply means the person does not have a job. And he may not even keep quiet. He may talk a lot, eat a lot, hang around a lot, and at the same time, he says he is keeping quiet. Therefore, not doing anything is definitely an action. And for that action, there is an agent, a doer, a karta. Because people think they do action, they also think they do not do action. This is because both the action, pravritti, and the non-action, nivritti, are attributed to Atma instead of to the Karta, which is superimposed, aropita, upon the Atma. In this way, Atma is taken to be the Karta, and the doing or not doing of an action which is centered on that Karta is mistakenly attributed to Atma. So the whole thing is only a matter of superimposition. Action is dependent upon Atma. At the same time, no action is totally independent of Atma. And in Atma, there is no action whatsoever. Because people do not know this, they are under the spell of delusion, ignorance, seeing action in inaction and inaction in action. One who is able to see Atma as Akarta never performs any action, even when he does an action, karma. Such a person will see akarma in karma because he knows that Atma does not perform any action whatsoever. Actually, this previous sentence is a little, um, you know, because people do not know this. They are under the spell of delusion, ignorance, seeing action in inaction and inaction in action. We'll read further and then we'll come back and repeat this whole or whole verse one more time. The nature of Atma. The nature of Atma, the self, is in the form of pure consciousness. The very word self implies that which does not need to be revealed to you, the self, by anything else. It is Svata Siddha, right? You require no means of knowledge, no pramana to prove your existence. That which requires no pramana, no means of knowledge, that which is self-evident, is the self, Atma. And what is its nature? It is in the form of pure consciousness, knowledge as such. Because Atma is unqualified knowledge, there can be particular knowledge which is nothing but consciousness plus some qualification that appears in the form of knowledge of this or that. Knowledge as such must be there before it can be qualified. For example, for there to be pot knowledge, ghatagnyana, cloth knowledge, patagnyana, man knowledge, purushajnana, or women knowledge, stri jnana, there must be knowledge as such, unqualified by anything. This unqualified knowledge is the nature of the Atma. Knowledge as such gets seemingly qualified in the form of thought, vritti. With vritti, knowledge seems to be qualified, and without vritti, it is unqualified. This unqualified knowledge is consciousness, the nature of Atma that performs no action. Why do we say that Atma performs no action? One reason is that action implies motion or some change. Try to think of an action without motion, without change. Any motion, any change from one condition to another, from one form to another, is action. Even a chemical reaction is an action. But can we say that Atma, whose nature is consciousness, is subject to action? Consciousness is not subject to motion because, being all pervasive, it is not located at one point for it to move to another point. Consciousness does not move within itself either, nor does it have any part to undergo any change. Consciousness not being an assemblage of things. Only that which is put together can undergo change. Things that are put together will naturally fall apart without anything being done. It is their nature to fall apart, which is also an action. Even a car that is kept unused for 25 years will undergo some change, and a Rolls Royce is no exception. Whether the car is running or not running, it is subject to change, simply because it was put together. Samha tattvat. There is always entropy for things that are put together. So anything that is put together can also come apart. A pot is created, it can be broken. So anything that is put together can be taken apart. A good way to understand entropy is to leave your room as it is for some time without doing anything about it. Just live in it. Don't sweep the floor. Don't clean. Don't put anything back in its own place. What will you have? Entropy. What is the meaning of entropy here? Inevitable and steady deterioration of a system or society. Inevitable and steady deterioration of a system or society. It's got far meaning implications here of how adharma, if dharma is not protected, how adharma can just be flagrant. Anything that is put together tends to dissipate, to fall into disorder. This movement from order to disorder is entropy, which is also action. Only the self is not subject to this entropy. Because why? The self is not put together. It is what is.
So this entropy is a sort of a law, right?
It is a law. It is a natural law.
Anything, bante bigarte, they say, everything put together has to separate.
Consciousness, the nature of I, the self, does not tend towards disorder because there is no order. Atma not being made up of parts. Only when there is creation is there an order and therefore disorder. Atma is one whole, limitless in nature. Atma being not limited in any way, what can it do? It cannot go anywhere because it is not limited place-wise. It cannot change or modify itself into anything. It cannot grow into something or dissolve into something. No action is possible for Atma. There is not even sankalpa, decision in Atma, nor is there any kind of thought which is also action. To say, I remain quiet means that there are certain other times when I am not able to be quiet. Consciousness does not say this because consciousness is always quiet, nirvikalpa, and undergoes no modification, vikalpa whatsoever. Because there is nothing that is separate from consciousness, vikalpa is not possible. There is no such thing as the self going into something or reaching out to the world. It has already reached out to the infinite. It is one whole, free from all limitation, in the form of pure, simple consciousness. Atma performs no action, nor does it prompt something else to perform action. And in its presence alone, all activities take place. So we'll stop here. We'll just reflect on this. I know I did one constant reading without any repetitions. But let us, from this, what we've heard and understood, share our understanding. So the whole thing is a matter of superimposition. We are superimposing action on Atma, which is actionless, which is infinite, which is pure consciousness. So it boils down to that fundamental error again. And how does that come? From avidya.
That karta, karak, and karma, that analogy is also given of Rama. So why it is means there is also karta. So we see as Rama as a being. So everything he has done as a personality. But when it is not connected to the core, means then the Atma will be Shuddha. Means if I'm not doing that I'm not doing, I'm not the doer, then everything is witnessed like that.
All that is pratibhasika satya.
Pratibhasik, so everything is happening only on the superficial level.
It is the example very clearly given, no? Of the, when you're moving in a boat, the trees are moving. Are the trees moving? No. As though
And
moving.
even if it is not moving, we can see that means we are moving, but we feel we are steady.
Correct.
That also happens.
And this beautiful concept of entropy. Anything that is put together falls apart. So we'll stop here today and continue tomorrow. We'll read the whole thing one more time. I think I'll complete this part and then we'll read the whole thing. This shloka we'll have to read 1 or 2 times more, because for us to understand, there's a lot of, it's a huge
The
one.
4 karakas is it's explained. So today is not, I don't have time, but that 4 karakas, the legs and all, we can go to that analogy again.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do all that. We'll do it once, one whole time. Okay. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Gurudev.